juxtapose that, this idea of existing for the world, when it seems that all of our goods and services in the current reigning paradigms as a whole are ministering to the saints itself. And you actually quote some of Newbegin's pretty stark words, where he mentions that it should be, I mean, I allow you to tell the story there of what Newbegin said when he was asking someone about why the church existed. Do you remember that in the book? Would you relate that story to us?
He's having a conversation.
Pretty tough.
He's having a conversation, I believe it was with some Indian brothers, wasn't it? Talking about the health of their church. And he asked the question, why does your church exist? And the answer that came back was not outward facing. It was more organizational in nature. And his stark response was, well, then maybe you don't have a justified reason to exist. If there's not a kingdom vision, if there's not something that is not only curating disciples in a intellectual and formation sort of way for themselves, but casting them out on mission in order to have an impact in the spaces that this church is going to occupy, both in its gathered and scattered sense, then there's not a point. You're a club. That's a very, very loose paraphrase.
In page 82, you talk about the difference between being a belief-focused and an action-focused church. And I like how you qualified that. I thought that was very interesting, because I've seen that. I've heard other people. I actually know of one pastor. He got hired at a church, and he asked the church to go serve the poor. And they were going on an event on a Saturday, and one person out of the entire 150 people showed up. And so the next day, when everyone came to church, he put chains on the doors. It's like, I'm closing this church because we're not existing to help other people. And how do you juxtapose those two? Because we do know that we need to have right theology. We see that there are so many people especially within progressive Christianity, you've moved away from biblical Christianity completely. You're denying the truth of who Jesus is. I mean, you're questioning the very scriptures itself. How do we help people to maintain this tension between the two? Because we are to be belief. I mean, we are informed by our beliefs, as Kevin Van Hooser says. It's this drama of doctrine that we present to the world, and this performance script on the stage of the world that we invite people to be a part of, and helping them to see that belief isn't, and it can be divorced from action. How do we help people to see that?
Yeah. Well, again, I just think that sometimes maybe in any number of the things that we've already talked about, whether it's dividing across racial lines and doing a church that's a pocket of like or similar people, or whether it's the efficiency driven, we have common affinities, so we're going to utilize the homogeneous unit principle to drive towards our base and create a church of like people. If we are being brought into a body, and if we are a diverse body, then I need somebody. I'm a teacher. I teach theology. I teach missions here in a classroom. Like, I probably skew towards the belief side of things. I need somebody in my church who's pulling at my shirt, being like, we've got to get out there. We need to be doing this and the other. And then I need to be speaking into his life to be like, yes, and we need to make sure that's grounded. And we need that tension of people who have perhaps maybe a bias on one side of the belief action line, but who are committed to saying, I know intellectually that even though I'm naturally predisposed to this side, that I need the other side. And so I need a brother who's opposite me in that regard. And we need to link arms, and we need to fight it out, and we need to be willing to be uncomfortable not getting our preference in exclusive fashion, but rather saying, I need somebody to call me out on the things that I'm naturally predisposed to be blinded to.